Good morning and welcome to Sunday Soul Day, weekly fuel for your mind, body, and soul. Good morning, Allie.
Good morning, Denisha.
Good morning, Michael. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing great today.
Wonderful. Well, we have Michael Laidler, who is a dedicated law enforcement officer, retired, but also the inspiring speaker and author of Greatness Beyond the Badge. We are so thrilled to have him on the show today. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Michael.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be on here with you guys.
Awesome. Well, let's dive in. You have such a incredible background that I can't wait to share with the audience. Would love to just start kind of early on in your life. Where did you grow up? And I know that you were raised by a single mother. Tell me a little bit about your kind of early life before you started your law enforcement journey at 19.
Well, for me, I started, as you said, at 19, but going back to before all of that, because before any career, we have to start somewhere. I grew up in Miami, Florida, single mother, disabled grandmother, no father. We grew up not having the most money, found ourselves moving a lot just because when you can't pay your rent, you get evicted. So we kind of went through a lot of that early on in life. Then we eventually transitioned into getting at least a one-bedroom apartment later on when I was in high school. And from that point forward, I mean, I worked a lot. I think we all have, especially if you started at 16. And it allowed me allowed me the opportunity for a lot of different experiences that eventually transitioned to my law enforcement career.
I still am impressed that you started at 19 because, I know what I was doing at 19. So it was definitely not thinking about my career. So I'm still so impressed, and especially coming from a single mother. I do have one quick follow-up. Like, what was that like growing up with not having a father around?
So I think growing up, because I'm a fairly laid back person, I never really looked at it on like a day to day, a month to month, or a yearly basis as what I was missing versus appreciating what I had. So for me, I grew up a very loving household. My mother worked for Bell South, which and eventually turned to AT&T. She was a 411 operator back when we used to call 411 or dial zero to get information. Now you just go to Google or Apple Maps, whatever program you provide. And she never failed in the loving area. So for me, I grew up in an extremely loving household. Now, as far as the father side goes, he was never there. So I didn't really have that kind of male support. I had role models that were women, particularly my mother, seeing what my grandmother did. Then I had an older sister, but I didn't really have a lot of men to kind of mimic. Not because they probably weren't around. I just said, no, that was something I should be doing because I wasn't raised that way. So for me, I had a good lifestyle because I had all the basics I needed. I had food, we had electricity most of the time. We usually had some kind of shelter, and then we had that relationship of we're all together and we're all in it together.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And I love that you took that perspective, because a lot of times people take the opposite perspective, which is they're looking at all the things that they're lacking and things that they don't have. And it's not easy, going through life as a young man without a father. So the fact that you look to your mother and the women in your life as role models is really beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, and it helped out a lot. Definitely gives me strength that I have now.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I agree with what Denisha said. You were able to look at what you had and the love that you had in your home. And kudos to your mom for providing that for you. And for you, kudos to you for being able to look at life through the glasses half full. Yeah, that's amazing. So I want to ask a little bit about your career, your journey. So transitioning from a police officer to a border patrol agent, and then to a federal bureau in prisons. You had a diverse law enforcement career. Could you tell us about the roles that you've held, and the unique experiences that you've gained along the way?
Absolutely. Being in law enforcement has been amazing to me. And I didn't talk about it when I was talking about my upbringing, but back when I was 9 years old, I already knew what I wanted to be. I knew I wanted to be in law enforcement from back when the O.J. Simpson trial was very prevalent in the 1990s. Like, I was glued to the TV set, watching the chase, the trial, the investigations. I was all into that. So from 9 years old, I knew I wanted to be in law enforcement. specifically, I wanted to be a homicide detective in LA. Now, I never got the chance to do that, but it still paved the path for me to build my knowledge and my mindset to getting into law enforcement. I studied law enforcement in high school. I started studying law enforcement when I got to college. And in the summer of 2004, coincidentally, my sister was a dispatcher. Now, that wasn't something, a long-term career that she planned to have. It was just something she was trying to do to pay bills. She brought me home an application and said, hey, look, they're hiring police officers. You're 19. You have the college experience they're looking for. Apply. I applied, not knowing if I would get it or not. I got a phone call in December 2004, and they said, guess what? You're starting the academy at January 2005. And I was halfway as a 19-year-old. So by the time I hit the streets, I was kind of on that borderline of 19 turning 20. So for me, I had to really mature quickly because I went from just dealing with my own problems to now dealing with society's problems. And it was a big lifetime adjustment for things I had to look forward to. So my experiences as a police officer were very maturing, if that's the right word to use. It gave me a lot of experience quickly. It showed me how to talk to people better. It showed me how to relate. It showed me how to have empathy because as a police officer, like every other law enforcement industry or career, you find yourself getting into people's situations that they look for you for an answer. So for me, the experience was very good. They were humbling. Then I realized that I wanted to get into the federal government. I tried the FBI based on my current, or at the time, my experience. They weren't really looking for police officers with bachelor's degrees. They were looking for more of somebody that had a more specialized, like a lawyer, scientist, things of that nature. So I took the next best thing to me, which was Border Patrol. And when I say that was a roller coaster of joy, fun, excitement, it was. It was probably the most exciting career I had. Just being on the border, different things we were able to do. I was a canine handler. That was an amazing time. Then when my son was born back in about 2012, or when my ex-wife told me that he was going to be born, we realized that we had to get closer to family. And where we were at the time in Border Patrol didn't allow me to be close. So we decided that we were going to go from the Border Patrol to the Bureau of Prisons. That was about 2013. And then that transition into corrections was another kind of pivot, but an interesting one because a lot of times in law enforcement, most people will start in the corrections or county jail. It was like, for me, I kind of went backwards, so to speak. But my experience working with the federal corrections has been life-changing. I've learned so many different things. I've been given so many different opportunities. They are literally their own world. They have their own social workers, their own psychologists, their own doctors, human resources, obviously correctional officers. They have their own accountant, things that you probably wouldn't think of normally. Federal corrections have. So just all of that experience in law enforcement has been really good to me. And I always recommend people to at least try it if they're thinking about it. But definitely get yourself involved in something like that because overall, each career showed me something consistent. And that's people have a lot of things going on, but we can be that beacon of light that helps them through it.
Yeah, I'm so curious. Like, what Border Patrol doesn't sound like an exciting, job. Okay, I'm just going to be totally honest. Like, that's not the first thing that came to my mind when I read your profile. Like, what made it exciting for you? Because I've heard the other side of it. That's really heartbreaking and sad for people that are trying to cross borders and do things. So tell me a little bit about like what made it exciting for you.
I went into Border Patrol as a young man. I was in my early 20s, and by the time I left, I was in my mid to late 20s. And for people like myself that have a lot of energy, there's always something to do. There's always a person to look for. And one of the things about Border Patrol is their number one goal, at least back then, I think it is still today, is stopping terrorism. That's one of the whole reasons that the Department of Homeland Security was developed, was to target terrorists. Now, what you mostly get is kind of what you just mentioned. You get more people that are just trying to get a better living, more people that are trying to just take their lives to a different level because of wherever they're at right now is substantially worse than the US. But there was always something to do. The paperwork was minimum. And for someone like me, it kept me busy. So it was kind of like the best of both worlds because as a police officer, I stayed busy, but everything you did had paperwork. Border Patrol, you were just kind of out there. Like you chose your workload. If you want to do a lot today, you will. If you want to do a little bit today, you will. It was literally up to you on how much you want to do. So for me, especially when I got that canine partner, just working with a dog, it's hard to explain outside of saying, think how much passion you have for your own dog if you're into dogs. Now think about having that partner with you all the time and you guys becoming in sync, like, hey, if he looks left, you're looking left. If he looks right, you're looking right, and having that protection. So for me, that was the roller coaster of joy. Obviously, there was bad days in there where you had to deal with some bad families, and you heard people like struggling, like, hey, I just came here because I make $1 a month. So I can make $30 a month here in the US. I have to send back the other 29. So those days were not as fun, but the overall staying busy was something that I enjoyed myself in Border Patrol.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for clarifying. That makes more sense that you're trying to help protect. And
oh, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for clarifying. I'm sure our audience would have been curious about the excitement piece of that.
No. I didn't want to just put families in jail. Trust me, that was not the exciting part. The exciting part, just that you guys know, just like when y'all watch cops on TV, they only show you the exciting parts. Those are the fun parts. A lot of those things happen in Border Patrol that usually don't see. What you're going to see is usually the more politicized part of the job. And when you see that, that's not fun. It's not fun when I have to go inside of a holding facility and there's 80 people in a room that's only 50. That's not fun. But finding actual bad guys that are carrying drugs in or trying to do something wrong, that's the fun side. And you get a lot of that with Border Patrol. It's just that nobody talks about that because it's not sexy. But you're going to hear about the family that took 5 days to get here, and now immigration or ICE or whatever term people want to use are trying to send them back. That's what the TVs are going to tell you. But those Border Patrol agents that are working each and every day, the ones that are actually catching bad guys, a lot of them enjoy their job because it's things to do.
Thank you again for explaining that for us. And you're right. Yeah, sometimes the bad news will get attention. So thank you for sharing that. And so I want to ask you about, age 35, you had a profound realization about the direction that your life was taking. Can you share a little bit about your journey of self-discovery and personal development?
Well, I'm going to tell you, first and foremost, it wasn't something that was given to me. It wasn't something that someone said, hey, Michael, you need to work on yourself. And if somebody did say that, I wasn't listening back then. I was literally at my house that I'm in right now. It was the summer of 2021. And I was just looking back and like, what am I doing with myself? Mind you, at the time, I've already been in law enforcement now for 16 years. I had a speaking business that was kind of there. COVID was going on. Obviously, I was active in law enforcement. I had just saw what was going on with George Floyd that happened earlier before that. And I started looking back at some of the events in my life, like growing up different places, growing up homeless, growing up with a mother that went through depression. Some of the things I saw in my law enforcement career, bad traffic crashes, traumatic incidents, then going through a divorce. And I started wondering to myself, like, what else is out there for me? Like, what am I doing? And it literally took just my own epiphany inside my house saying, you know what? I'm not doing much in my life right now because I've been on survival mode since I was in high school. Because once I got a job at 19, it was enough to pay the bills. And then I started to look at other people's lives and careers. And not saying that I can dig deep and tell you if you're happy or not, but I saw success that I was like, you know what? I should be able to have that kind of success as well. And then I started to look at things that I was doing. I was like, I don't have that because I'm not pushing myself. I'm not extending myself past the limit that I thought I had. And for me, I started to look back at all the different things and I started trying to figure out, well, what can I do to get better? And that's kind of where that self-awareness journey came up. And I was like, you know what? I need to really discover who I am, the failures I've been through. I need to figure out why I need to develop myself and then ultimately how to get there. Because in law enforcement, we're always tied to an organization. We are hidden behind a uniform. And our goal is to go out and make other people happy. Our goal is to go out there and protect people. Our goal is to go out there and serve. But when it comes to us, a lot of time that's put on the back burner. And that's completely wrong. And that can go for any industry because people fail to realize that organizations are designed to meet their mission. And the people working in that organization is not always the mission, which is fine. Once you understand an organization is a structure, an entity, it's fine to understand that part. Don't go quit your job. I tell you that right now. Don't go do that. Work on yourself so you can be the best employee, but it starts with you. And for me, I had to realize it started with me. And as I started to look at more things, I'm like, okay, what can I do to improve myself? And that's what allowed me to be at a place where I'm at today, just reflecting on everything that I had going on.
Wow. That is, first, you've been through so much. Like, I mean, you mentioned the loss of a child, like you even experienced homelessness. I mean, so many different things that I can only imagine that you know, kind of carried with you. And then divorce, Allie and I both have been through divorces. And, you know, I tell people it feels like a death, you know, it's just the person is still alive and it's the death of the relationship that you're, you know, mourning. You know, I'm so curious about your dedication to personal development. Like, what was it that happened? Like, there's always that like pivotal moment, and maybe it's more than one, but like, what happened that really made you just start looking at yourself and more inward a little bit more?
For me, I think it was an accumulation of events that happened in my life.
Yeah.
And it was me sitting at home, looking around at my four walls, wondering, why am I not doing more in my life? Like, why am I not being more productive? And not saying my life was bad, because my life, I don't think my life has really ever been bad to a point where I couldn't do more. But to me, I realized I wasn't pushing myself. And it literally, like I said, it was one of those wake up moments that you just are like, oh my goodness, like there's so much more out there. Like literally, like I was blessed enough to not to have anything like very specific. And I know a lot of people say, oh, I lost my job. I lost my spouse. I lost this family member, and it hit me. For me, it was just something that just happened. And when I say that, we've all been through a lot of things. And in law enforcement, you learn to suppress a lot of things. So over time, it's very easy to go through traumatic events and just forget about it. Because in law enforcement, that's what we're designed to do. We're designed to deal with your problem, whatever traumatic it is, or how traumatic it is, and keep moving. So same thing when it happens in our lives, you can't just turn that switch off. Although a lot of people say they can, your brain doesn't work like that. Like, I'm not a brain scientist, and I know there's a real name for that, but I'm not one of those people that, I mean, people say, oh, you could turn it off on your way home. No, you cannot. Your subconscious works all the time. And a lot of people have the issue thinking that they could just turn it off. So for me, literally, it was like one of those morning showers that I'm like, oh, maybe I should go write a book kind of situation. Same thing. It was like one of those situations where, you know what? I need to step my game up in my life because I'm not doing enough.
Wow. Yeah, that's, I mean, I can feel that from you. Like, I could tell it was like an accumulation of things and not just one thing. So I love that you shared that a little bit deeper. And you're so right. Like, you said something that made me think of a quote when you were saying, like, I could be doing so much more, you know? And that's really how I felt. Like, I was working in tech for over a decade. And I felt like, you know, while that was amazing and I had an incredible experience, so grateful for the journey and all the lessons that I learned. But I also felt like, my goodness, I'm not even tapping into, you know, my gifts and all the things that I know God put in me, you know, that I want to share with the world. And so it made me think of this quote by Irma Bombeck, which is one of my favorite quotes. I've said it a few times. So if the audience, you've heard it already, sorry, I'm saying it again. But it's when I stand before God at the end of my life, I would hope that I wouldn't have a single bit of talent left, so I could say to him, I used everything you gave me. So I love that you kind of mentioned that.
Yeah, no, that's an amazing quote. And it's true. I mean, people are thinking that they have to have this like miracle moment to start pivoting their life. No, just look at where you're at right now. Don't wait for something bad or traumatic or something to happen to say, oh, now I want to change my life. If you see something, go jump into it. You don't have to wait. And that was for me, like, could something bad have happened, like really bad happen in my life to me say, oh, that's something I have to fix? Of course. But if you look around your surroundings right now, just take where you're at in your life. There's things that you can change or start improving on without someone coming to tell you. For me, I didn't realize that because I didn't really have mentorship. I didn't know how to seek it that well. I didn't realize certain things that I had to do. So that's why I said for me, I was fortunate to have things happen, but there was more things that I had to do to keep pushing forward. And that's what allowed me to kind of get over that hump.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I wanted to say what stood out for me was the in law enforcement, how the unspoken is to compartmentalize. I talk with police officers. My brother-in-law is a police officer, and they share that, oh, I'm jaded. I've seen it all, so it doesn't impact me. And to hear you say it absolutely does, and it does, it's true. As a therapist, one of the things we're taught while we're in school is to self-care or to debrief or to be in consultation groups with other therapists so that we can process, our mind can process it, so we are not having a secondary trauma based on observing someone else's trauma.
So thank you so much, Michael. And it's a testament to your dedication to personal development and growth. It's just evident in all the work that you were doing on yourself, your awareness that you had, your educational journey, earning your master's degree, and then becoming a distinguished Toastmaster. Tell me a little bit more about that. Like, what made you sign up for Toastmasters?
It's actually pretty crazy because I was never forced to do it. So I want people to understand. And Toastmasters is such a cool organization that you can come and go as you please. But back in 2015, I was given the opportunity and I earned the opportunity to become a lieutenant. So that was my first time in a formal leadership role. And as a lieutenant, I know that's required for you to communicate. And prior to that, I really can be an extreme introvert. I know people don't believe it. People are like, oh, Michael, you're lying. There's no way you could be an introvert. You public speak. Yeah, because I trained myself on how to do that. But back then in 2015, I didn't have this training. I knew I was going to a leadership role. And I started to look up different ways of how I can improve and just through word of mouth. I found about Toastmasters. So what Toastmasters is, it's an international organization based on helping you improve your ability to speak, as well as improving your leadership skills. They give you the confidence through their curriculum that they have set up to effectively learn how to be successful in both of those areas. So for me, Toastmasters is what brings me once again to where I'm at today with a speaking business, because I gained a lot of confidence knowing that there was other people on my side that wanted to see me grow.
Well, I've heard nothing but amazing things about Toastmasters, and one of our other guests who we had on the show also is doing Toastmasters. So I can see how it's helped your speaking, as well, like as you're a speaker, speaking to so many different people and impacting them. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
And I am an extrovert, and I still struggle so much with public speaking. And as Demisha knows, with having ADHD, I get so rambled and jumbled and off on tangents, and I get extremely nervous. I could talk to anyone if it's one-on-one, but if I'm having to speak in front of people or even during the interviews, it is so hard. So maybe I should look into Toastmasters because it does not come natural for me to speak in front of people. So such a good idea for me to do that as well. So you're the author of Greatness Beyond the Badge. What inspired you to write this book, and what key messages do you aim to convey in your for your readers?
Back when I was 35 and I was thinking about what I can do to improve myself, I started looking at my industry and I was like, you know what? Where can law enforcement improve? What haven't I received in 3 different organizations? What have I received in the last 15 years of being in this or just in this field? And self-awareness was one of them. Because once again, as I mentioned, a lot of times we associate ourselves with an organization versus ourselves. So for me, I created the presentation, Greatness Beyond the Badge. It actually started off as the Invisible Law Enforcement Officer, the 3 key principles for self-awareness. But for marketing purposes and getting with my publisher, I was like, let's look at a different title. So it's actually interesting that I wasn't going to write a book about it at first. And then I heard this podcast in March of 2022. And on this podcast, this person said that they can publish your book from start to finish in 90 days or less. I'm all about challenges. Like, I heard the challenge and I was like, you know what? This may be something that, I thought about writing a book before, but I never really had the true direction to do it. But when I heard this podcast, I was like, you know what? Let me take them on. So literally, I signed up for that program within a week of hearing it. I worked on my manuscript for about 35 to 45 days, like straight writing and audio dictating every single morning for about an hour to 2 hours. And by July 26, 2022, my book was published. So I went starting off 2022 with no expectation of writing a book to having a published book by that time. And it was over 90 days. And that was because my editor said, hey, you know what? Let's add a little bit more. So my inspiration for writing that particular book came from realizing where I need the self-awareness at. So the book actually focuses on developing who you are as a person, understanding your purpose on developing yourself, and then finally kind of creating that path to greatness to kind of help you strategize on how to be that person that you want to be going forward.
And I think it's great coming from someone in law enforcement. Once again, I'm kind of echoing on what I said earlier, that you can be a person who is open about your emotions and provide space for other people in law enforcement to be open about their emotions as well. Again, because you're taught there's kind of a fraternity or culture of not having feelings and being tough. So having a book about how to be your authentic self and your journey, I think is going to be really helpful and inspiring for so many people in your line of work and beyond.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And really well said, Allie. One question I had, Michael, in your book, and I can imagine leading up to that, just the amount of resilience that it took to kind of get to this place for you. Tell me a little bit about some of the takeaways in the book.
One of the takeaways, the very first part of the book talks about developing who you are as a person. So one of the things I quickly look at is overcoming failures. If you're watching this video, you're listening to the audio side of it, whatever it is, you've overcome a failure. So why stop now? Because I've had friends, coworkers, read about it. People take their lives because whatever failure they have going on plays an impact in that. Now, there's other things like chemical imbalances and other things, but sometimes people are just having a really hard time dealing with life. Failures make you who you are. And if you don't realize that, think about where you are today. There's so many life experiences, so many wise words you've given to others that you need to recognize that early on. And you take those failures and you build. So where I start off is letting people know that, you know what, failure is going to happen. It happens to all of us. We've all talked about divorces. That's not a win. Trust me, none of us went into a marriage thinking that we were going to get divorced. That wasn't the ultimate goal. So we got into these situations and we look at them and now figure out how I've grown. So very first part of the book talks about failure, how to overcome that. Then I get into dissonance. And when I looked at that, I was like, you know what? That really describes law enforcement. You know what? That really describes a lot of people, because a lot of people have the wrong balance, work-life balance. They think, you know what? I need to be in the office 60 to 80 hours a week, and then nothing else matters. That's completely wrong. Once again, I don't want you to quit your job, but if you're not finding time for yourself and your family, a part of that process, you're going to experience burnout. You're going to experience fatigue. You're going to feel like you're failing them because you're not there. That company, I promise you, unless it's your own, will run when you leave. Trust me, I've been in this is my third organization. I've had many clients in the past, and they're still running without Michael Laidler being there. So what does that tell me? You need to refocus the priorities. So the second part of the book talks about prioritizing your development right out the gate, so then you can be impactful to your family and then be impactful to the organization. And then the last part of the book, towards the end especially, talks about time management. A lot of us have a difficult time controlling what we have. So we have time controlling us. So I look at different things in there. We talk about chronotypes, like your sleep patterns. We talk about how to actually manage your time hour by hour. I actually have something called the 24-hour formula, and it's literally planning your whole day out, hour by hour. When do you sleep? When do you eat? When do you go to work? When do you exercise? When do you spend time with the family? When do you grow yourself? We put all this together because I realized that all that was going on in my life and it wasn't being addressed. So when I look at the 13 chapters of my book, that's where it comes from. It comes from taking away you being the number one person in your life to help grow the people around you.
Wow. Those three things are just incredible, and I cannot wait to dive into your book further. The embracing failure, I think it's not taught enough. Like, even as children, like, I remind my small children, like, it is okay to make mistakes. Like, I love that you touch on that, because I think a lot of times we beat ourselves up. We make a mistake, like you said, with us three, having divorces. That's not a win, but in some ways it is a win, because we learn so much. So I think, like, looking at failure through that lens is so important. And then the prioritization of yourself. This is why Sunday Soul Day was birthed, because I think, a lot of times we give so much to every area of our lives, and then whatever's left over is what we give to ourselves. And that is the wrong formula for success, to your point. And so, and then the time management is such a key component. Like, I time block my life right now. So like, on my calendar, you'll see everything on there, from when I just even want to take a break or meditation. Like, it's all on my calendar. So I love that you mentioned the time management component.
Yeah, it's important.
Yeah. And it's so interesting that you paired failure with the example of divorce, because that felt for me like one of my greatest failures initially. And actually, it was my mom that sat down with me and helped me to see it as one thing that I had done, not who I was. And I had actually stayed in the marriage because I was so afraid of hearing the words "I told you so" from the people around me, because that would have felt like the ultimate failure, that I failed in the eyes of others, or those whose opinions mattered most to me. So I love all of your little tips and techniques that are included in what you had just shared. So your mission is to inspire others to break free from survival mode and embrace a thriving life. Can you share some strategies or insights that have helped you and that can maybe benefit our listeners as well?
Recognizing how much value you already have in yourself. A lot of times we want that external confirmation on how good we are, when we really just need the internal confirmation. Like, look at what you have already and cultivate whatever that skill set is. That's what I love about self-awareness. That's why, if I talk about anything nowadays, it's always about growing myself. Because even with my book, there's things that I've learned about myself, part of this journey that I didn't know before, because what I keep realizing, that it's a everyday mission to get better. So for me, back even when I was writing my book, I didn't think about survival versus thriving. It was something I started to realize. I started to go back to my reality, and I was like, you know what? This is why I had to write this book, because I had to make myself better. Now, obviously, it's to inspire others. It's to motivate others, but I need to inspire myself first. So for me, I had to go back to that and be able to bring that to light for others. So when I look at changing those mindsets, I look at what I bring to the table. And then I want people to look at what they bring to the table already, because a lot of us don't need this magic pill to be impactful. We just have to know what we are already good at and just demonstrate it.
Yeah, and what you mentioned about going from surviving to thriving, that's actually the 12-step recovery model. And I was in Codependence Anonymous, and it talks about going from surviving to thriving and taking all the actions to get into that space. And so many of us believe we deserve to survive only, or that's the only cards for us in our future. And so knowing that we can and we deserve to go from one space to another is so important. So thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And you're so spot on. Like, I think a lot of times we always look for external validation, and until you kind of flip that switch and understand that all of your gifts, everything, all of your validation should start with you. And for me, I always say, like, I don't really look externally for any validation. Like, my validation comes from God and myself. But I think a lot of times that's hard. Like, I wasn't always in that space. Like, I looked to the validation of my parents. And so I think there's always something or someone that we're looking to. So the fact that you mentioned that is So huge. I love that you touched on that. As a single father and an author and a speaker and all the things that you're doing to inspire others, how do you harmonize your life? Like how do you fuel your mind, body, and soul? How do you take care of yourself?
I go back to what I teach other people to do. I literally manage my time. People always say, Michael, how are you doing a podcast? How are you traveling to Dubai? How are you taking your son to the Mavericks game? How are you going to church? It's called a schedule. Like I don't know what else to tell people. Like I don't want people to overthink their lives on what they need to do. Now, everybody has things are different. So has different things going on in their life. So I don't want people to think that just because you put a schedule down, nothing else is going to happen. Things happen all the time and you have to be ready for it. But in a perfect world, if you can plan, it minimizes some of those random things. Can you foresee yourself being sick? Can you foresee your car engine blowing up? No, you can't see some of these random things that happen. Can you see the electricity going out all of a sudden? No, you don't see it, but you should still have some kind of plan in place. So for me, I keep the harmony by actually having a schedule, like trying to plan things out. Like I knew this past weekend that I wanted to take my son to go see a Mavericks game. So I put in my calendar, I blocked time off to drive to Dallas, drive and go sit in these stands with him. Because to me, that's what I wanted to do. Now, if I'd have said, well, let's just kind of see an hour before the game started, I'd have been stressed out trying to get tickets, trying to get parking, trying to get there. But it's about planning. So for harmony to happen for me, it's a lot of scheduling. It's a lot of planning. It seems kind of tedious, but when you put yourself on the forefront through planning and scheduling, it's a lot easier than what you may think it might be.
Yeah, absolutely. And the scheduling absolutely helps. But what happens like in those moments where things pop up, like you say, like how do you handle those moments?
Oh, I've been in law enforcement now for 18 years. Adaptability is like second nature. Like what people once again, one of the joys of being in law enforcement is that no day is the same. Literally. Like you could go to the same house call 5 days in a row, and the sixth day you don't know what's going to jump in front of you. So adaptability, if you're not very good at that right now, part of your self-awareness and your self-development going forward, spend an hour a day reading about adaptability, read about different ways to pivot your life. That's part of your own growth. For me, I can just tell you where I'm at. And as a person, I've grown to adapt to random things going on because that's what my life has been about. Someone that's really structured and very meticulous on their time, things don't happen. If you think something's going to come up, I recommend going to read, going to podcasts, do meditate, whatever you need to do, but plan for it because things happen. So for me, when things randomly show up, I always have my mind open to it because it's already happened. So, for example, going through a divorce, I did not plan for that. So I had to learn how to adapt to that lifestyle. It wasn't something that I was excited about, but it was definitely something that I had to look forward to as far as planning and trying to get over. So adaptability is something I would probably tell people if you're not good at it now, go research it and find ways to kind of grow to what you need to be in that level.
Yeah, I'm really glad you clarified. And thank you, Demisha, for that follow-up question, because I was wondering too, because I have too many clients that have a plan and then it makes them more anxious. So the idea of being able to pivot is so important. I always say you can have a plan, but be prepared for anything. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, like, being able to adapt yourself. Like I'm very adaptable. Like my parents moved us around a lot, like due to my father's career. And, I lived in different states. We went to a lot of different schools. So I learned that early on in my life, but I also think it comes from practicing under pressure is what I like to call it. I call it PUP. And in practicing putting is that so cute? So I like to put myself in those situations, like even in my workplace where I'm practicing under pressure, that's what builds that adaptability and resilience too. So
You're right.
I would love to ask you this, and I know that you're a reader, you're an author. Besides your book, what other books have kind of helped you along in your journey and have been instrumental in your healing and kind of development?
Now, I know this question was coming up because a lot of people usually ask this kind of question. And there's always one book I go back to, and it's called Lincoln on Leadership. It's an older book that talks about just life as a leader. But some of the things that he talks about is things just as a person, like management by walking around. So if you're in a leadership role, you get to know your people best by walking around. He also talks about like how to deal with difficult situations. So, for example, he would say if he had let's say he got an argument with Ali, and he was like, "Hey, I want to go sit there and fuss at her." He was like, "Wait, let me write a letter. I'm gonna put the letter in my drawer, and then the next day I'm gonna come back and look at it. And if I feel the same way the next day, then I'll give it to her." But 9 times out of 10, it never happened that way. So a book like that has been very transformative for me. And it happened early. Like I read the book, and it's been around longer than when I read it. I read it like 5 or 6 years ago. But I've been able to apply all the different strategies and principles since I started reading. So that's probably my favorite book. Now, there's other books, like a book called When by Daniel Pink. It talks about the chronotypes and sleeping and stuff like that. Taking naps, which I love that he talks about that, and I try to take them as much as I can. There's the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership by John Maxwell. There's the Energy Bus. I forgot who that's written by. I mean, there's all types of books, but I find myself gravitating towards that Lincoln on Leadership just for different principles in life.
I have not read that one. I will definitely check that out. And The Energy Bus is an incredible leadership book. Like I read that book within like a couple of hours because it was just a page turner for me. And I've recommended it to so many people. I really love that book. And I haven't, you said When is the other one?
When, When.
Okay.
By Daniel Pink.
Oh, perfect. Okay. I'm definitely going to check that out as well. Any podcasts that you listen to besides Sunday Soul Day, of course?
Besides your podcast, I'm always up and down. Trying to think of which ones I've listened to recently. I don't want anyone to pop out of my head that I just can't think of, but I'm all over the place. Like, I don't have any ones that I listen to every single day, but anything that's uplifting, motivational, I tend to gravitate to. Obviously, I gravitate to law enforcement ones because that's my industry, and I tend to find myself, and for anybody listening, whatever your industry is, you should promote it. You should enjoy it. If not, leave that industry and go find another one. But I find myself usually in that one. So there's no actual podcast that I consistently listen to, maybe besides you guys and a few other shows I've been on, just because I find myself doing more audio books, if anything, when I'm driving.
Love that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. I want to ask you about any future aspirations that you have for yourself, both personally and professionally.
Personally, I would like to get married again one day. Hey, I tell people, hey, they're like, "Oh, do you want to get married again?" I say, "Yeah, my marriage wasn't bad. We just had different views." So personally, I would not mind doing that. Obviously, my son is doing a lot, so I'm always trying to boost him up. He's into basketball. Professionally, I think my career is expanding. It's going at the speed that I need it to go to or go by. Obviously, everybody wants to be the next Elon Musk. I'm not anywhere close to that, guys. My son thinks I am. I don't know why, but he thinks I make like $1 billion a year. That's how he tries to make me spend money. But professionally, what I would like to see, at least over the next, let's say, year, me getting my organization to a point to where I have other instructors teaching for me some of the programs I have. Because as I expand, I realize that the more people you have teaching whatever you have going on, the more your message gets along. Just like I have a book already, that gets out. I mean, people tell me they read my book that I've never met before. So it's always enlightening and kind of invigorating to hear that. So even maybe writing a book next year, because people keep asking me to write another one, but that takes time. It takes at least 90 days, I know for sure. But it's definitely something that I'm kind of looking at. But writing a book, expanding my business, personally, just finding the right people to be in my life, to stay in my inner circle to help me grow.
Yeah, that's so funny that our children believe that we are made of money.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah.
He does.
Yeah. And I think it's really sweet that you are open to marriage again, because I know oftentimes when, we go through a divorce, we kind of close ourselves off to it. And so kind of going with your what you share with, everyone else about how, failure is part of life. Like it's kind of, going along with that message that you can have that type of situation. And then you have your, heart open again for future relationships. So I think that that's wonderful. Can you tell us where people can find you, Michael?
Well, just like where I found you guys, my favorite platform, it's a very professional platform, and it's not like TikTok or nothing like that. It's actually LinkedIn. I love me some LinkedIn because you get a lot of different views, but professional views, and it connects you with people. So if you're looking for me, you could just type in my name, Michael Laidler. that's just where it's at. And I'll pop up with a sign of me holding my book, at least whenever you view it. If not, it will be my face. I'm on Instagram. I don't post as much on there. I have my YouTube channel, which I post either my podcast or any videos I create, because I do push out at least one video a week, because I think it's important for me to be a learner to kind of push that out. So those are my main platforms. My website is michaelaidler.com. And then obviously you can email me if you have any questions.
Thank you, Michael. This was such a great interview, and you have such a different perspective than I'm used to, than maybe many of our audience members are used to. But it is so necessary, like I mentioned before, being in law enforcement and being in touch with your emotions and helping guide people to a place of healing is so important. And thank you for that leadership and for inspiring others.
Thank you.
Absolutely, Ali, so beautifully said. And I was going to say your leadership style is just really inspiring, and I'm so grateful that you reached out to us and that you blessed Sunday Soul Day. This was just an interview that I didn't expect, and I love your perspective on so many things and the tips that you gave everyone. And I know there's so many takeaways that our audience is going to just, all the nuggets that they're going to take from this. So just really appreciate you coming on and sharing your journey.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Y'all gave me a great platform to speak on, so I'm excited.
Absolutely. And I have a takeaway for our audience. Michael gave so many nuggets. Put your favorite one in the comments. Everyone have a wonderful Sunday. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next Sunday.